Hello, I'm Larry Leong, and welcome to the special edition of Title Pending on its almost but not quite 20th anniversary. This is the action short that eventually led to a few Hollywood stunt careers. So there's Steven and Lateef. Lateef, you may have seen him in some things. There's Kerry Wong, followed by Tony Chu, co-founders of ZeroGravity. Kerry's blowing on his hands because it's winter in Oakland. We shot it in winter because Kerry was about to move to Los Angeles, and it was the only time we could have done it. That lottery ticket was a JPEG we found on AOL or something and printed out. So ZeroGravity was founded in 1998 by a group of friends who were martial artists of different styles that trained together and started doing live shows and performances. And after about a year and a half of talent showcases and other events, Kerry and Tony decided it was about time to take a stab at making a film. There's Dan, Steven, and Bobby's shoulder. And so everyone involved basically knew nothing about filmmaking, so it's kind of miraculous it got finished at all. And all this stuff you're seeing now was actually shot on the second to last day. We started shooting on December 30th, 2000, and had 5 shoot days plus 1 choreography day on location within a 2-week time span. We had no idea how much of this running around stuff to shoot, so essentially we had them run laps around the Lake Merritt BART station. We didn't know anything about shot lists or storyboards or continuity, so we're just a bunch of dudes running around outside with a camera. Nobody called the cops on us. So everyone involved in this was a friend or acquaintance of Kerry and Tony. For instance, Steven and Lateef trained capoeira in San Jose and were Tony's friends. All this stuff on the playground was shot in a day and a half. It was always busy there, but nobody paid much attention to us. In the background, you can see a lot of drywall just sitting around, and those are for sequences that were cut because we ran out of time. This is Lincoln Square Park on Harrison Street. Shoot time was a limiting factor because some people could only show up on certain days, and we often had to make do with whoever was there, and it's not like everyone had cell phones at the time either, so sometimes you just couldn't find out where people were at all. If they showed up, great. In the background there is a piece of drywall sticking up out of the sand, and I can't remember why. There's also a piece of drywall on top of that dome for some reason, but just all for ideas that we ran out of time. And since none of us had any filmmaking experience at all, the angles were us emulating what worked in our favorite action movies. And we'd do as few takes as possible, maybe 3 or 4 at most, because time was just really tight. I don't remember who came up with this story, but it was always in place before we started. We knew we had to have one because we didn't want it to be a sampler or a bunch of fights with no context. So Tony always really wanted to do the ballsiest stunts. So it was funny to show up and Tony would be like, "I'm falling off the boat today," thud. And we'd be like, "What?" And then he'd do it. You know, at this point, I've honestly forgotten where the bag of money was supposed to be. Shows you how well we worked on continuity. And it's funny because Dan gets up here, so I guess Bobby and Steve just died or something. Now, this part, I'm actually not 100% sure where this is. I think it was the adjacent elementary school, but it looks completely different now. Our cameraman was named Quinn. He did a ZG live show in 1999. We had a lot of problems with the camera because recording to digital was not a thing yet. We shot on DV tapes that had to be converted via Firewire. It was a hugely time-consuming job. Essentially, Tony put the team on his back for the next couple years doing all of our editing for the majority of the film projects. And there's me running in out of nowhere. I was brought onto the project because I ran a huge capoeira website at the time when there were extremely few websites on the style. So they knew I was in the Bay Area and just emailed me an invitation. And most of this alley stuff was done on day 1. We shot for 9 hours and had a mostly complete scene. But there was no continuity and a completely different opening. Kerry worked on the short for 2 days. Then he had to move and eventually decided to come back for 1 day so we could get enough footage to save the project. There were a few meetings in between where we added people or changed the entire sequence of events a couple times. And being young, broke, and foolish, we were doing all of this with no padding or protection whatsoever. And frankly, we weren't even sure what to use at the time. And and more on this Gainer twist stunt later. Because the whole film was a lot of choreo on the spot, or barely rehearsed, we were actually missing an order of the fights and all the transitions between them. So when Tony took all the tapes home and edited for about 5 days, I had to go over to his house and took about 4 hours making a list of all the shots so I could put them in order and it would at least mostly make sense. And only now, if you really pay attention to it, you can see that people just straight up disappear. But, it's not bad for a first attempt. So that guy who just ran in was Tom Duong, who ran a Taekwondo tricking website at the time. I used to hang out with him in the South Bay. And we decided to add him basically just to have him. So all his shots were done on the last day. He showed up late with a hangover, which is just how he rolled at the time. Kerry really wanted to punch this board in half because he came from a Kyokushin karate background. Getting hit by that board hurt like hell, let me tell you. And I'm dead. So the final day of the shoot was January 14th, 2001. We released it online January 31st, I believe on a site that Kerry's brother Greg hooked us up with. Keep in mind, YouTube wasn't a thing until 2005 and still took a year to really get going, so all our film releases were us scraping together whatever available bandwidth existed anywhere we could get it. We never had a clear idea of how many people saw our movies, but we'd eventually meet people from all over the states who had seen them. So Title Pending ultimately surpassed all our expectations, and we carried on making movies for a while. It's about time all our early work got organized, so everything will be re-released in the coming months. Check out zgmain.com. Here's the original logo. Alright, this is an edit that was made after the first day, and it uses the alternate and incomplete takes that we cut out later. You can see we actually went so far as to try to explain why that passage had all that drywall sitting around. So here's Bobby and Steve doing a hilarious door gag. Originally, the majority of the action was all here. We hadn't shot any playground stuff, nor knew where to put it yet. Tony is wearing an extremely wide jacket and pants, which was the style at the time, because the fight was supposed to end with a fire stunt. We shot here for 9 hours straight and spent about a third of that time trying to get the fire stunt to work. You'll see it. So here's an alternate idea with Latif and I arriving in, that's Tony's car. And because the fire stunt didn't work out in the end, we had to reshoot most of this because Tony was wearing the wrong clothes. Latif was holding a gun there for 1 second just so Tony could do that trick off the car hood. Reshooting this did give us a chance to redo some bad angles and things, and to point out lack of continuity already, you can see Tony's nowhere to be seen in the background, and we just hadn't thought out the order of things at all. So, here's some more alternate shots. You can see that originally I met my demise very early on. And then in the next couple of shots, you can see transitions are just obviously missing. And Steven and Dan show up out of nowhere, mainly so just so Dan could get the fall off of the dumpster. And there you see the date. See, kids, back then you had to be extremely careful about checking your settings or your shot would be ruined by a timestamp. And check out this cameo appearance by our tripod on the left there. This is us just flying by the seat of our pants. Oh, this reaction by Latif is great because we didn't know anything about acting after the shot was over, so... And clearly these fire shots are missing the whole setup and resolution. And it seriously ended right there because we ran out of time and had to change everything structurally for the next day. So, for the sake of common sense, kids, don't light yourselves on fire unless you're remarkably well insured, and even then, don't do it. We had wet blankets, buckets, fire extinguishers just in case, but the biggest problem actually was that we were so new that we didn't even know how to clear the frame. So more than half the time we'd get someone still in frame that wasn't supposed to be there. So you see all our stuff off to the right there, and then we'd roll, and then everyone would be like, I don't know where to run. And ultimately we just decided that it was just too much, it took up too much time to get right. And it's just kind of a hilarious aside. It was the only time we really screwed with fire. So before we started shooting, we practiced a few times at the gym but most of it again was just making it up on the spot. So this footage on the boat, this is from one day where we didn't shoot anything for the film, but we only tossed around ideas for the boat, the playground. So picture just a bunch of 20-year-olds just out there in the winter just playing around and seeing whatever worked. And that was our whole process. So of course at the time none of us had any idea whether or not, this thing would become anything significant. And plenty of things went wrong, as you're about to see. Falls with no pads, and we used to be proud of that sort of thing. There were a lot of funny moments and miscommunications that happened. Like on day 3, we heard that Latif was injured and he couldn't drive himself or Steven to location, so we cut all his fights out. And then he shows up the next day and was fine, so we put them all back in. And just rolling with whatever all the time, and learning on the fly and weirdly enjoying it, just bruises and all. Clank, that hurt. Also, there was so much loose gravel on this lane, it just made things really difficult and hazardous, as you'll see. And slide. So this gainer twist stunt, they knew I could do one, so at the gym Carrie says, I'm going to roll under that, and somehow I agreed to it. So I did maybe 2 takes and damn near had a heart attack, because doing that on concrete with a guy rolling under me was just terrifying. So following the positive reception of the project, I became a full-fledged ZeroGravity member and cranked out a few film shorts called the Damn series until we had enough material and new people to put together Title Pending 2, which was a massively huge undertaking in comparison. And that'll be up on zgmain.com eventually with extra footage and outtakes and stuff. And here's Quinn getting the last fall. Thanks for watching.